This is the remarkable story of Mike Harrison, a gifted mechanic whose life changes forever when he notices a young girl in a wheelchair watching her classmates play outside his garage. Instead of turning away, he dedicates every spare moment to crafting something extraordinary. Custom prosthetic legs built from salvaged metal, hand-cut joints, and improvised hydraulics, all assembled with meticulous care. When she finally stands and takes her first running steps, her joy echoes through the neighborhood. But what Mike doesn't know is that tomorrow morning, a private jet will land on the makeshift airstrip near his shop, carrying someone who will transform his humble garage into something beyond his wildest dreams. What happens when one act of kindness opens the door to an unimaginable future? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rusty hinges of Harrison's auto repair groaned their familiar morning greeting as Mike lifted the heavy garage door. Dawn's first light caught the silver threads in his hair, earned through 30 years of bending over engines and wrestling with stubborn bolts. His father's toolbox, scratched red metal with Thomas Harrison hand-painted on the side, sat in its place of honor near the workbench, a reminder of 3 generations of mechanical expertise. Mike's calloused fingers traced the worn edges of the toolbox as he began his morning routine. The small garage, with its oil-stained concrete floor and walls decorated with vintage car parts, had been his sanctuary since he was tall enough to hold a wrench. Every tool had its place, every corner held a memory, and even the persistent scent of grease and metal carried the comfort of home. Mrs. Jenkins's '85 Buick waited patiently for its monthly tune-up. The old car, like many in Millbrook, had seen better days, but Mike kept it running with a combination of skill and improvisation that had become his trademark. Times were lean in their small town. The factory closure 3 years ago had hit everyone hard, but Mike's reputation for honest work at fair prices kept a steady stream of customers coming through his doors. He was halfway through adjusting the Buick's timing belt when he first noticed her. The girl couldn't have been more than 12, her wheelchair positioned carefully in the shade of the oak tree across the street. School had just let out, and children streamed past her, their laughter and chatter carrying across the afternoon air. Some nodded hello, others pretended not to see her. Mike watched as she adjusted her position slightly, trying to follow the movement of a basketball game in the vacant lot next door. Her hands gripped the wheelchair's arms tightly, knuckles white with an emotion Mike recognized all too well. The desperate wish to join in, to be part of something that seemed forever out of reach. The sight stirred something deep in his chest, a familiar ache he thought he'd buried years ago. In her face, he saw echoes of another young girl, his Katie, who never got the chance to run and play. The cancer had taken her too quickly, leaving behind only photographs and the memory of a laugh that used to fill these same garage walls. The tools in his hands suddenly felt heavier. Mike had spent his life fixing things: cars, motorcycles, farm equipment, anything with gears and moving parts. But some things couldn't be fixed with wrenches and socket sets. Or could they? He found himself walking to the garage entrance, wiping his hands on the red shop rag that was always tucked. In his back pocket, the girl noticed his approach and offered a small, hesitant smile that transformed her whole face. "I'm Mike," he said, crouching down to eye level. "I've seen you watching the games. You like basketball?" "Sarah," she replied, her voice carrying a quiet strength that reminded him even more of Katie. "I used to play before." She gestured vaguely at her legs, encased in metal braces that looked heavy and cumbersome. "Now, I just watch." Mike nodded, his mechanic's eye already assessing the crude braces, noting the poor joint design, the excessive weight, the limited range of motion. In his mind, alternative designs began to take shape. Lighter materials, better articulation, hydraulic assists. "Would you like to play again, Sarah?" The hope that flashed across her face was answer enough, though she tried to temper it with practiced resignation. "The doctors say I might walk properly again someday, when we can afford the special procedures and equipment." Mike glanced back at his father's toolbox, at the garage that had been his family's legacy for 3 generations. He thought about the skills passed down from father to son, about problems solved with ingenuity when money was tight. And he thought about Katie, who would have been about Sarah's age now. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "we have to make our own someday." Long after the last customer had gone home, Mike sat at his workbench, the only light coming from a battered desk lamp that cast long shadows across scattered pages of medical textbooks. The local library's prosthetics manual, dated 1998, and dog-eared from years of use, lay open before him, its diagrams a maze of technical terms and complex biomechanics. "You're still at it, I see," Clara, the night librarian, had said when he'd checked out every book they had on prosthetics and orthopedics. She'd known him since high school, had watched him raise and lose Katie, had seen him pour himself into work afterward. The knowing look in her eyes told him she recognized the familiar signs of Mike Harrison on a mission. His notebook filled with sketches, crude at first, then increasingly detailed as the nights wore on. He'd always been able to visualize how things worked, to see the dance of moving parts in his mind before putting wrench to metal. But this was different. This wasn't about fixing a broken timing belt or rebuilding a transmission. This was about giving a young girl back her dreams. The coffee pot gurgled in the corner, its 3rd batch of the night growing steadily bitter. Mike barely noticed, his attention fixed on understanding the complex interplay of joints and leverage, points that made human movement possible. His mechanical knowledge helped him grasp the basic principles, but translating them into something he could actually build, that was the real challenge. In the drawer of his workbench, beneath warranty, cards and old invoices, lay a photograph he hadn't looked at in years. Katie at her last birthday party, sitting in her hospital bed but smiling that irrepressible smile, the one that never dimmed even when the treatments got harder. He pulled it out now, propping it against the lamp. "What do you think, sweetheart?" he murmured, sketching another variation of a joint mechanism. "Your old dad's trying something new here." The next morning, Ralph Kendrick brought in his Ford pickup for its annual inspection. As Mike worked, he found himself studying the truck's suspension system with new eyes. The way it distributed weight, absorbed shock, adapted to varying loads. There were principles here he could use. "You seem distracted today, Mike," Ralph observed, leaning against the garage wall. "Everything okay?" Mike nodded, already mentally adapting the truck's shock absorption design into something that could work for a much smaller, more precious cargo. "Just thinking about a special project. Wouldn't have anything to do with that girl in the wheelchair, would it?" Ralph's voice carried no judgment, just the quiet understanding of someone who'd known Mike most of his life. "Saw you talking to her yesterday. Reminded me of Katie. Way she held her head up. Same kind of spirit." Mike's hands stilled on the wrench. "She deserves a chance, Ralph. To run, to play, to be a kid. Heard her mom works double shifts at the hospital," Ralph offered. "Marie, I think her name is. Good woman, doing her best on her own." The information settled into place like a perfectly fitted part. Mike had wondered about Sarah's family situation, had seen the worn edges of her clothes that spoke of careful budgeting. A single mother working double shifts would explain why Sarah spent so many afternoons watching the other kids play. That evening, after closing up shop, Mike drove to the medical supply store 2 towns over. The clerk raised an eyebrow at his questions about joint mechanisms and weight distribution, but Mike had spent too many years solving impossible mechanical problems to be discouraged. He left with a handful of catalogues and a growing understanding of what he was up against. The newest prosthetic systems were marvels of engineering and priced accordingly. But Mike had built his reputation on finding creative solutions when money was tight. Looking at the sleek, expensive designs in the catalogues, he began to see possibilities in the scraps and spare parts that filled his garage's back room. Back at his workbench, Katie's picture watching over him, Mike opened his notebook to a fresh page. "All right," he said to the quiet garage, "let's see what we can build." The first prototype was a disaster. Mike stood in his workshop at midnight, staring at the twisted assemblage of aluminum tubing and steel joints that looked more like modern art than medical equipment. 3 weeks of evening work, countless sketches and hours of careful machining, all amounting to something that wouldn't support a child's doll, let alone a growing girl. "Well, that's not going to work," he muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. The scattered components on his workbench told the story of his attempts. Salvaged motorcycle fork springs too stiff for their new purpose, hydraulic lines from a brake system that leaked under pressure, joints that bound up instead of flowing smoothly. But failure was an old friend to any mechanic worth his salt. Every vehicle that had ever rolled into his garage with an impossible problem had taught him the same lesson. There was always another way, if you were willing to look hard enough. He began sorting through the failed components, analyzing each piece's shortcomings. The aluminum was too light, flexing under stress points he hadn't anticipated. The joint design, adapted from a bicycle gear system, couldn't handle the complex rotational forces involved in human movement. And the whole assembly was far too heavy. He'd been thinking like a mechanic, not considering the energy it would take for Sarah to move these artificial limbs. Sarah still came by the garage most afternoons, sitting in her usual spot under the oak tree. She never asked what he was working on, but he caught her watching with quiet intensity when he carried materials between the garage and his storage shed. Sometimes their eyes would meet, and she'd give him that small, hopeful smile that made his chest ache with determination. One evening, as he was closing up shop, Sarah's mother Marie stopped by. She was still in her hospital scrubs, looking tired after what he assumed was another double shift. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice carrying both warmth and concern. "Sarah told me you've been kind to her." "Mike, please," he replied, wiping his hands on his shop rag. "And your daughter's good company. Reminds me of someone I used to know." Marie's eyes drifted to the single photo on his wall. Katie, in her baseball uniform, before the diagnosis. "I heard about your daughter. I'm so sorry." Mike nodded, the familiar grief sitting quietly in his chest. "Sarah has the same look in her eyes, same determination." "She does." Marie's voice softened. "Sometimes I think that's harder than anything else, watching that determination run up against—" She gestured helplessly at the wheelchair. "What if it didn't have to?" The words came out before Mike could stop them. He led Marie to his workbench, showing her the sketches, explaining his ideas in the technical language he knew she'd understand from her medical background. "This could work," she said slowly, her finger tracing the latest design. "But the materials alone would cost—" "I've got materials," Mike interrupted. Been saving every suitable piece for years. Just didn't know what for until now. He didn't. Mentioned the college fund he'd never gotten to use for Katie. Some things didn't need saying. Marie studied him for a long moment. Why? Because some things shouldn't be impossible just because they're expensive. The next prototype came together differently. Mike stopped trying to reinvent existing designs and started thinking about the unique advantages of his salvaged materials. A titanium strut from a high-end motorcycle frame provided lightweight strength. Ball joints from European sports cars offered smooth articulation. Aircraft-grade aluminum sheet metal, carefully shaped and reinforced, created custom-fitted support segments. Each failure taught him something new. When the first joint design locked up, he developed a hybrid system using sealed bearings from high-performance wheels. When weight distribution proved problematic, he adapted the progressive resistance principle from modern shock absorbers. Every broken part and strip screw brought him closer to a working solution. Late one night, as he tested the latest joint mechanism, a quiet voice came from the garage doorway. "That's for me, isn't it?" Sarah sat in her wheelchair, illuminated by the security light. She must have wheeled over after seeing his garage lights still on. Mike considered his answer carefully. "If you want it to be. Still got a lot of work to do, though." Sarah rolled closer, examining the half-finished prosthetic with intense curiosity. "Everyone says you're the best mechanic in town, that you can fix anything." "Not anything," Mike said softly, thinking of Katie. "But maybe this time." Sarah reached out and touched the smooth metal surface, her fingers tracing the curves designed to match her own measurements. Measurements he'd estimated from careful observation and photos of her existing braces. "It's beautiful," she said simply, and looking at it through her eyes, at the possibility it represented rather than its imperfections, Mike had to agree. The wheelchair sat in the corner of Mike's garage, a temporary resident while Sarah explored. His workshop on the old office chair he'd rolled out for her. Her eyes lit up at each tool he explained, each process he demonstrated. It became their afternoon routine. She'd arrive after school, and he'd teach her the basics of his craft while working on her prosthetics. "So the hydraulic system works like the brake lines in a car?" Sarah asked, watching him carefully bend a piece of copper tubing. Her quick mind grasped mechanical concepts faster than any apprentice he'd ever taught. "Similar principle," Mike explained, holding up the tube for her inspection. "But we're using it to help control movement instead of stopping it. See how this valve here regulates the flow?" Marie would join them when her shift schedule allowed, bringing coffee for Mike and helping Sarah with homework at the small desk he'd cleared. The garage slowly transformed. A mini fridge appeared, stocked with drinks and snacks, a corner bookshelf filled with Sarah's textbooks and Mike's technical manuals, fresh flowers in a mason jar on the workbench, Marie's touch brightening the industrial space. "The other nurses keep asking about you," Marie mentioned one evening while Sarah was absorbed in her math homework. "Words getting around about what you're doing?" Mike glanced up from the joint assembly he was fine-tuning. "Nothing special about trying to help." "Everything special about it," Marie corrected softly. "Do you know Sarah started talking about college again? Engineering, if you can believe it. Before this, she'd stopped talking about the future entirely. The words hit Mike like a physical force. He remembered Katie's dreams, written in her journal, dreams that never had the chance to grow. But Sarah's dreams were still alive, still, reaching for tomorrow. The local paper ran a small story about the project, tucked between coverage of the high school football team and announcements for the county fair. Mike only knew about it because customers started bringing copies for him to sign, their eyes warm with approval and something like pride. "Always said you were a genius with machines," old Joe Thompson declared, thumping the hood of his ancient pickup. "About time everyone else figured it out." The attention made Mike uncomfortable, but he noticed it had an unexpected effect on Sarah. She sat straighter in her wheelchair, answered questions about the project with growing confidence. The same kids who had once hurried past now stopped to talk, fascinated by the emerging technology in their small town's humble garage. One rainy Tuesday, Dr. Chen from the regional hospital paid an unexpected visit. He stood in the garage doorway examining the latest prototype with professional interest. "Remarkable work," he said finally. "The design principles are sound, though I hope you'll let me advise on the medical aspects." Mike wiped his hands and offered one to the doctor. "That's exactly what we need. I know machines, but the human body, that's your territory." Dr. Chen smiled, pulling out a notebook. "Let's talk biomechanics." The collaboration opened new possibilities. Dr. Chen's expertise helped refine the prosthetics interface with Sarah's legs, while Mike's mechanical innovations solved problems that had stumped traditional medical device manufacturers. "You're creating something unique here," Dr. Chen observed during one of his now regular visits, "something that could help a lot of people." Mike just nodded, focused on adjusting a connection point. He wasn't thinking about other people yet. His world had narrowed to this one project, this one girl, this chance to make something right. The prototype evolved weekly, each iteration bringing them closer to the goal. Sarah's mother watched the progress with growing emotion, her hand often finding Mike's shoulder in silent support. Their fingers would brush when passing tools or sharing coffee, lingering a moment longer each time. "Thank you," Marie whispered. One evening, as they watched Sarah examining the nearly completed prosthetic design, not just for this, but for giving her hope back, Mike turned to answer and found her face closer than expected, her eyes bright with unshed tears. For a moment, he saw his own journey reflected there, the grief, the healing, the unexpected joy of finding purpose again. "She gave me something back too," he replied quietly, and they both knew he wasn't just talking about hope. The morning of the first test arrived clear and cool, sunlight streaming through the garage's windows and catching the polished metal of the completed prosthetics. Mike had been up since dawn, triple-checking every connection, every joint, every safety feature. The prototype gleamed on his workbench, a testament to 6 months of trial and error, of late nights and early mornings, of hope shaped into steel and titanium. Dr. Chen arrived first, medical bag in hand, his usual professional demeanor touched with excitement. "The X-rays confirmed everything's properly aligned," he said, reviewing his notes. "The attachment points are perfect for her bone structure." Mike nodded, too tense for words. He'd checked and rechecked the measurements 100 times, but this wasn't like testing a rebuilt engine. This was Sarah's future they were working with, her dreams balanced on the precision of his craftsmanship. Marie arrived with Sarah at 9. Both of them dressed for the occasion, Sarah in new athletic shorts that would accommodate the prosthetics, Marie in scrubs from her night shift, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless anticipation. "Ready?" Mike asked Sarah, crouching down to her eye level. She nodded, her face a mixture of determination and barely contained hope. "I've been ready my whole life." The fitting process was meticulous. Dr. Chen supervised each step, checking pressure, points and circulation as Mike made minute adjustments. Sarah watched intently, asking questions about each component as it was secured. Her technical understanding had grown alongside the project. She could now discuss hydraulic systems and joint articulation with surprising expertise. "How does that feel?" Mike asked, tightening the final strap. Sarah flexed her new joints experimentally, eyes widening at the smooth response. "It feels light, like they're part of me." "The real test comes next," Dr. Chen reminded them gently. "Remember what we discussed. Small steps at first." They had cleared a path through the garage, setting up parallel bars borrowed from the hospital's physical therapy department. Marie stood at one end, hands clasped tightly together. Mike positioned himself at the other, ready to catch Sarah if needed. "Whenever you're ready," he said softly. Sarah gripped the bars, her face set in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, she began to pull herself up. The prosthetics responded exactly as designed, hydraulics hissing quietly as they took her weight. Each joint activated in sequence, supporting her movement with the precision Mike had spent months perfecting. "That's it," Dr. Chen encouraged. "Just like we practiced." Sarah stood fully upright for the first time in years, her hands white-knuckled. On the bars, tears streaming down her face, Marie made a small choked sound of joy. "I'm standing," Sarah whispered. "Mom, I'm standing." "You're doing great, sweetheart," Marie managed through her own tears. "Do you want to try a step?" Sarah nodded, her expression shifting from wonder to determination. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her right foot. The prosthetic responded smoothly, advancing through its programmed sequence of movements. When she set it down again, it bore her weight perfectly. "The balance is perfect," Dr. Chen noted professionally, though his voice wasn't quite steady. "Try another step, Sarah. Step by step." Sarah made her way down the bars. Each movement grew more confident than the last as she learned to trust the mechanisms Mike had built. Halfway through, she looked up at him, her face radiant with joy. "They work," she said. "They really work." Mike could only nod, his throat too tight for words. In Sarah's walk, he saw Katie's determination. In her smile, he saw all the future possibilities they'd dreamed of for his daughter, now reborn in this moment. At the end of the bars, Sarah took her hands away, standing independently for the first time. Then, before anyone could stop her, she took a step without support. "Sarah!" Marie gasped, starting forward, but Sarah was already taking another step and another. Her movements were uncertain but growing more confident with each passing second. She reached the garage door and turned, managing 3 steps back before Mike caught her as her legs finally trembled with fatigue. "Sorry," she said, not looking sorry at all. "I couldn't wait. Don't apologize for flying when everyone expected you to walk," Mike said softly, helping her back to the wheelchair. "How did they feel?" Sarah's eyes shone. "Like freedom." Dr. Chen was making rapid notes, muttering about exceeding all expectations. Marie had her hands pressed to her mouth, tears flowing freely. But Mike's attention was fixed on Sarah's face, on the boundless future he saw reflected there. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll try running." Sarah's answering smile was brighter than the morning sun streaming through the garage windows, brighter even than the memory of Katie's last smile that had driven him all these months. In that moment, Mike knew they'd created something more than just prosthetics. They'd crafted hope itself from spare parts and determination. Nobody noticed the black SUV parked across from the garage that afternoon, its tinted windows reflecting the summer sun. Nobody saw the man in the crisp charcoal suit making notes on his tablet, or the sophisticated camera capturing every moment of Sarah's first steps. But they were there, watching, documenting, evaluating. The next few days passed in a blur of progress. Sarah spent every free moment practicing with her new legs, each day bringing new achievements. She could now walk the length of the garage without support, turn in smooth circles, even manage a few careful steps backward. Mike made minor adjustments as needed, but the basic design proved remarkably sound. "Look what I found online," Sarah announced one afternoon, wheeling into the garage with her laptop. She pulled up a video of the local news coverage that had somehow gone viral. "They're calling you the miracle mechanic of Millbrook." Mike grimaced at the title. Nothing miraculous about good engineering. "The comments disagree," Sarah grinned, scrolling through hundreds of responses. "People are asking if you can help their children too." That gave Mike pause. He'd been so focused on helping Sarah that he hadn't considered the broader implications. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. How many other children were waiting for their chance to walk? What he didn't know was that others were asking the same question. In a sleek office building hundreds of miles away, James Wellington, CEO of Wellington Medical Technologies, watched the viral video for the third time. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes sparked with intense interest. "Full background check on Michael Harrison," he instructed his assistant. "I want to know everything: education, work history, family situation, and get me detailed photos of that prosthetic design." Back in Millbrook, subtle changes began occurring around the garage. More cars seemed to park nearby, their occupants unusually interested in photography. Local reporters made increasingly frequent appearances, asking technical questions that seemed oddly specific. Dr. Chen noticed it first. "You're being watched, Mike," he mentioned casually during one of Sarah's checkups. "And not just by amateur YouTubers anymore. Those are professional photographers out there." Mike shrugged it off, more concerned with the slight hesitation he'd noticed in Sarah's right knee joint. "Let them watch. We've got nothing to hide." But Marie wasn't so sure. Her years of hospital work had taught her to recognize corporate interest when she saw it. "They're not just watching, Mike. They're assessing. This design of yours, it could be worth millions." "It's not for sale," Mike said firmly, making another minute adjustment to the knee mechanism. "It's for Sarah, for kids like her." The observers grew bolder. One afternoon, a woman in an expensive business suit walked right into the garage, digital camera in hand. "Mr. Harrison, I represent a medical technology firm that's very interested in your work." Mike looked up from the workbench, his expression hardening. "The garage is closed for repairs today, ma'am," she smiled, undeterred. "We're prepared to make a very generous offer." "The garage is closed," Mike repeated, turning back to his work. The woman left, but not before taking several more photos. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Mike sat alone in his garage, studying the prosthetics designs spread across his workbench. The original sketches, marked with countless revisions and improvements, told the story of his journey, not just of technical innovation, but of healing, of purpose found in helping others. His phone buzzed with another media request, making him sigh. He was a mechanic, not a businessman. He fixed things because they needed fixing, helped people because they needed help. The attention, the corporate interest, it all felt wrong somehow. But as he filed away the latest designs, a shadow passed across his workshop window. Out in the gathering dusk, another black SUV cruised slowly past the garage. The wind chimes Katie had made in art class tinkled softly in the evening breeze, drawing Mike's attention to her photo on the wall. He remembered her dream of becoming a doctor, of helping other sick children. Perhaps these watchful eyes weren't just a threat, maybe they were an opportunity. The sound of jet engines shattered the morning quiet of Millbrook. Mike was checking the day's appointments when he heard it, a deep, powerful roar that made his coffee cup rattle on the workbench. Through his garage door, he watched in disbelief as a sleek private jet touched down on the abandoned airstrip that hadn't seen use since the factory closed. "That's not something you see every day," Ralph Kendrick commented, wandering over from his neighboring feed store. Other townspeople began gathering, drawn by the unusual sight. The jet's door opened, and a small group emerged. Leading them was a tall man in an impeccable suit, his silver hair and commanding presence marking him as someone accustomed to authority. Behind him came a security detail, and then Mike's heart stopped. Sarah, walking confidently on the prosthetic legs he'd built. Sarah. Mike stepped out of his garage, confusion evident on his face. "What's going on?" The girl's expression was a mixture of apology and excitement. "There's someone I want you to meet, Mike." She gestured to the silver-haired man. "This is my father, James Wellington." The name hit Mike like a physical force. Everyone knew Wellington Medical Technologies. They were the largest manufacturer of prosthetic devices in the country, which meant Mr. Harrison. Wellington extended his hand, his grip firm and assured. "We need to talk about what you've created here." Mike led them into his garage, acutely aware of the oil stains on his floor and the ancient coffee maker sputtering in the corner. But Wellington didn't seem to notice the humble surroundings. His attention was fixed on the prosthetic designs spread across Mike's workbench. "I've had our top engineers analyzing your work," Wellington said, lifting one of the technical drawings. "Do you realize what you've accomplished? This hydraulic joint system, it's revolutionary. You've solved problems that have stumped our R&D department for years, and you've done it with salvaged parts and pure ingenuity." Mike glanced at Sarah, who was practically bouncing with contained excitement. "I just wanted to help her walk. And in doing so, you may have changed the future of prosthetic design." Wellington set down the drawing. "Your solution is elegant, cost-effective, and most importantly, it works. We've been watching Sarah's progress, the adaptability, the natural movement. It's unprecedented at this price point." "Those observers were your people," Mike realized. Wellington nodded. "I needed to be sure before making this proposal." He opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder. "I want to partner with you, Mr. Harrison, not buy you out. Partner. We'll provide the facilities, the resources, the distribution network. You'll lead the development team, maintaining complete creative control." Mike's mind spun. "I'm just a mechanic." "You're an innovator," Wellington corrected. "One who sees solutions where others see only problems. That's exactly what we need." He gestured around the garage. "Think of what you accomplished here with limited resources. Imagine what you could do with a fully equipped lab and a team of engineers at your disposal." Sarah stepped forward, her movement smooth and natural on the prosthetic legs. "Think of how many other kids you could help, Mike." The words struck him deeply. He looked at the photograph of Katie on his wall, remembered her passion for helping others. In his mind's eye, he saw other children running, playing, living the lives they deserved. "There's something else," Wellington added softly. "Sarah tells me about your daughter. We have a charitable foundation that provides prosthetics to children who can't afford them. I'd like to rename it the Katie Harrison Foundation, with you as its director." Mike turned away, overcome. Through blurring eyes, he saw Marie in the doorway. She must have just arrived from her shift. Her smile told him she'd known about this, had helped keep the secret. "What do you think, Katie?" he whispered to the photograph on his wall. The morning sunlight caught the glass, making her smile seem to brighten in response. When he turned back, his voice was steady. "I have conditions." Wellington raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "The main facility stays here in Millbrook. This town needs the jobs. And I want Dr. Chen on the team. He's been crucial to this project's success." "Already taken care of." Wellington smiled. "We've purchased the old factory. Renovation begins next week. Would you like to see the plans?" As Wellington unrolled the blueprints across his workbench, Mike felt the future reshaping itself before his eyes. But this time, it wasn't just Sarah's future or even his own. It was the future of countless children who would run, jump, and play on legs built with the same care he'd poured into that first prototype. The town buzzed with the news. By nightfall, everyone in Millbrook knew about the private jet, about Wellington's offer, about the possibility of the old factory springing back to life. Mike escaped the excitement by retreating to his garage, seeking solitude among the familiar tools and machinery that had been his constant companions for so long. "I thought I'd find you here," Marie said, stepping through the door with 2 cups of coffee from the diner. "Sarah's telling everyone at the hospital about the foundation, about Katie." Mike accepted the coffee, its warmth steadying his hands. "I should be angry, you know, about the secrecy." "Are you?" He considered the question, looking around his workshop. The prosthetics designs were still spread across his workbench where Wellington had left them, but now they seemed different. No longer just sketches, but blueprints for change. "No," he said finally. "Sarah needed to know if I'd help her for her, not because of who her father was. I understand that." Marie settled onto the old office chair that had become her usual spot. "James told me what you said about keeping the facility here, about Dr. Chen. This town's given me everything," Mike said quietly. "My father's business, customers who stuck with me through the hard times, people who helped me survive after Katie." He trailed off, touching the worn edge of his father's toolbox. "Seems right to give something back." The evening light filtered through the garage windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Outside, they could hear the excited voices of townspeople still gathered at the diner, discussing the day's events. "Remember what you told me when you first started working on Sarah's prosthetics?" Marie asked. "About making our own someday." Mike nodded, the memory clear in his mind. "Seems like a lifetime ago." "You did it, Mike. You made that someday happen. Not just for Sarah, but potentially for thousands of children." The scope of it all threatened to overwhelm him. He was used to dealing with tangible problems, broken engines, worn parts, things he could fix with his hands and the right tools. This was different. This was bigger than anything he'd ever imagined. "What if I'm not ready?" He voiced the fear that had been nagging at him. "Running a research team, directing a foundation, that's not exactly in my skill set." Marie's hand found his, her fingers warm and reassuring. "You rebuilt an entire prosthetic system from scratch, using salvaged parts and pure determination. I'd say problem-solving is exactly in your skill set." A knock at the garage door interrupted them. It was Ralph Kendrick, followed by several other townspeople, Clara from the library, old Joe Thompson, even Dr. Chen. "Hope we're not interrupting," Ralph said, though his smile suggested he knew exactly what he was interrupting. "But we've been talking, and we wanted you to know something." Clara stepped forward. "We've watched you work miracles in this garage, Mike, not just with machines, but with people. The way you helped Sarah, the hope you gave her, that's something special. And now you've got a chance to do that for others." Old Joe added, "Can't think of anyone better suited for it." Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. The medical knowledge can be learned, Mike. What can't be taught is the insight you have, the ability to see solutions where others see only problems. Mike looked at these people, his friends, his community, and felt something shift inside. Him. They weren't just offering support. They were showing him a reflection of himself he hadn't been able to see. His eyes drifted to Katie's photo, then to his father's toolbox, these touchstones of his past that had guided him forward. The tools inside that box had built more than just cars and motorcycles. They'd built hopes, dreams, and now they'd built a future he never expected. "You know," he said slowly, "my father used to say that the best mechanics don't just fix what's broken. They make things work better than they did before." He turned to Marie, seeing in her eyes the same certainty he was beginning to feel. "I think it's time to start making things better." The decision, he realized, had already been made, not just today, but months ago when he first saw Sarah watching from under the oak tree. Every sketch, every failed prototype, every small victory had been leading him here. Tomorrow he would call Wellington and accept the offer. But tonight, surrounded by the people who believed in him, Mike allowed himself to imagine the possibilities that lay ahead. Possibilities as limitless as a child's first running steps. The old factory had stood silent for 3 years, its empty windows staring out over Millbrook like hollow eyes. Now, on a crisp autumn morning, it hummed with activity. Construction crews swarmed over the building, their equipment creating a symphony of progress that echoed through the town. Mike stood at the entrance, architectural plans spread across a makeshift table, while James Wellington pointed out various features. "The main research lab will be here, with direct access to the testing facility. We've incorporated natural light throughout. Studies show it improves creativity and productivity." But Mike's attention had caught on something else. "You're keeping the original Harrison's auto repair sign," Wellington smiled. "Incorporating it into the main entrance. This facility might be cutting edge, but it should honor its roots." He gestured to where workers were carefully preserving the vintage brick facade. "Speaking of which, have you looked through the personnel files I sent over?" Mike nodded, thinking of the stack of resumes on his desk. Brilliant engineers and researchers from across the country, all eager to join the project. "They're impressive, but I'd like to add some local talent too. People who understand what we're trying to build here." "Your team, your choice," Wellington agreed, "though I notice you've already recruited quite an assistant." Through the dust and construction noise, they could see Sarah moving between work crews, her tablet in hand, checking progress against the schedule. She'd appointed herself unofficial project coordinator, her prosthetics allowing her to navigate the site with ease. "She's got an eye for detail," Mike said proudly, "and she understands the end goal better than anyone." The transformation wasn't limited to the factory. Mike's garage was undergoing its own evolution, becoming a temporary headquarters while construction continued. State-of-the-art computers shared space with his old tools, and the oil-stained workbench now held both wrenches and complex diagnostic equipment. Dr. Chen had set up a small medical office in what used to be the storage room, his expertise helping bridge the gap between mechanical innovation and medical necessity. "The human body is the most complex machine we'll ever work with," he reminded the growing team during their daily meetings. Marie had taken a part-time position coordinating with hospitals and medical professionals, her healthcare experience proving invaluable. She spent her free hours helping Mike adjust to his new role, teaching him the language of corporate reports and regulatory requirements. "You're a natural leader," she told him one evening, watching him review applications. You just lead differently than most executives. How's that? You lead with your heart, she said simply, and kissed him for the first time, there among the blueprints and possibility. The Katie Harrison Foundation was taking shape too. Wellington's legal team had fast-tracked the paperwork, and applications were already flowing in from families across the country. Mike insisted on reviewing each one personally, seeing in every photo and letter another child waiting for their chance to run. One morning, as dawn broke over the construction site, Mike arrived to find Sarah already there, sitting on a stack of lumber and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of promise. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her. "Too excited," she admitted. "Dad showed me the latest production estimates. Do you know how many kids will be able to help in the first year alone?" Mike nodded. The numbers still staggered him. Hundreds of children, maybe thousands, each one getting the same chance Sarah had. "It's a big responsibility. That's why." "It had to be you," Sarah said with the direct wisdom of youth. "Anyone can build a prosthetic, but you build hope." The words stayed with him as he walked through the evolving facility. In one corner, engineers were setting up a testing lab that would rival any in the country. In another, a team was installing the specialized machinery that would turn Mike's garage-built innovations into precision medical devices. But it was the wall of the main entrance that caught and held his attention. There, carefully preserved, hung his father's old toolbox, mounted beside Katie's photo and the original prosthetic prototype. Below them, a simple plaque read, "Every journey begins with a single step." "Nice touch," Wellington said, appearing beside him. "Sarah's idea." Mike ran his fingers over the worn toolbox, feeling the generations of history in its scratched surface. "My father used to say that tools are just extensions of the heart. It's not what you build, but why you build it that matters." Wellington nodded thoughtfully. "Wise man. I think he'd be proud of what you're building here." Looking around at the rising facility, at Sarah moving confidently through the construction, at Marie organizing the day's meetings, at Dr. Chen setting up his new medical office, Mike felt the truth of it all coming together. This wasn't just a factory or a research facility. It was a dream taking physical form, a hope being built one piece at a time. "We're not just building prosthetics," he said quietly. "We're building futures." The corporate ID badge felt foreign against Mike's worn work shirt as he made his way through the newly completed research wing. Gleaming laboratories had replaced oil-stained concrete, and the air smelled of fresh paint instead of motor oil. Sometimes, especially early in the morning, he barely recognized his own creation. "Mr. Harrison, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes, his new assistant called out, hurrying after him with a tablet full of presentations and reports. The young man, fresh from some prestigious business school, still seemed nervous around Mike, as if unsure how to interact with the CEO who preferred coveralls to suits. "Thanks, David. And please, it's just Mike." He tried to soften the reminder with a smile, but it felt stiff. The weight of corporate expectations pressed down on him like an invisible suit of armor. Inside the state-of-the-art conference room, the senior engineering team waited. Most were brilliant specialists recruited from top medical device companies, their credentials impeccable. But lately there had been tension. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrison," Dr. Peterson, the head of R&D, began as soon as Mike sat down. "These design modifications you're proposing, they're unorthodox. The liability concerns alone." "They work," Mike interrupted, his patience wearing thin. He pulled up Sarah's latest test results on the room's massive display. The simplified joint design cuts production costs by 60% while improving durability. "I've tested it myself." "In a garage," Dr. Peterson said delicately. But we're talking about mass production, regulatory approval, shareholder expectations. I think what Jack means, Marie interjected smoothly from her end of the table, having learned to navigate these waters herself, is that we need to balance innovation with established protocols. Mike felt a familiar frustration rising. In his garage, solutions came through doing, through hands-on trial and error. Here, every decision required meetings, reports, approval chains that seemed designed to slow progress rather than advance it. After the meeting, he escaped to the small workshop he'd insisted on including in the facility's design. Here, surrounded by tools and works in progress, he could still think clearly. Sarah found him there, tinkering with a prototype joint assembly. "Rough meeting?" she asked, recognizing the signs. "They want to add complexity where it isn't needed," Mike sighed. "Every simple solution gets buried under layers of bureaucracy." Sarah hopped onto his workbench with the easy grace her prosthetics now allowed. "Dad says you're teaching them as much as they're teaching you." "Oh? How's that?" "They know all about corporate structure and regulatory compliance, but you know about the people we're trying to help." She tapped her legs meaningfully. "You understand, it's not just about making a product, it's about making a difference." The wisdom in her words struck him. Looking at Sarah, seeing how far she'd come from that girl watching from under the oak tree, Mike felt his perspective shift. Later that evening, he found Marie in their shared office, reviewing applications for the foundation. Their relationship had deepened alongside the project, their personal and professional lives intertwining like well-engineered gears. "I'm not cut out for this corporate stuff," he admitted, sinking into the chair beside her. "No," she agreed, surprising him. "You're not cut out to be a typical corporate executive. But maybe that's exactly what this project needs." She handed him a letter from the stack she was reading. "Look at this." It was from a mother in Ohio, describing her son's dream of playing baseball despite having lost his leg to cancer. The letter was spotted with tear stains, the hope in her words almost painful to read. "This is why we deal with the meetings and the reports," Marie said softly, "because at the end of all that bureaucracy is a child who just wants to run." Mike thought about his own journey, from small-town mechanic to reluctant CEO. Every frustrating meeting, every corporate hurdle. They were just new kinds of problems to solve, no different in essence from the mechanical challenges he'd faced. All his life, maybe. He said slowly. "It's time to build some bridges instead of just prosthetics." The next morning, he arrived early at the facility. Instead of heading to his office, he stopped at each department, talking with the engineers, learning about their concerns, sharing his own experiences. He found Dr. Peterson in the testing lab and spent an hour discussing how to merge traditional safety protocols with innovative design approaches. By the time he put on his corporate ID badge for the day's meetings, it felt a little less foreign. Like his father's old tools, it was just another instrument for getting the job done. And the job, he reminded himself, watching Sarah lead a tour group through the facility, was more important than any discomfort. The first production line of Harrison Wellington prosthetics rolled out on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Mike stood with his team, watching as the precision machinery brought their designs to life. Each component emerged perfect, gleaming, a fusion of his garage-born innovation and modern manufacturing precision. "Initial quality control reports are exceptional," Dr. Peterson reported, his earlier skepticism replaced by cautious enthusiasm. "The simplified joint design is performing even better than projected." He paused, adding with a slight smile, "Sometimes the straightforward solution really is the best one." Mike nodded, remembering late nights in his garage, working by lamplight and intuition. "My father used to say that elegance in engineering isn't about complexity, it's about finding the shortest distance between a problem and its solution." The facility had found its rhythm now. In the research wing, engineers who once dismissed Mike's unorthodox approaches now sought his input, bringing him challenges that had stumped traditional methods. His workshop had become a kind of informal think tank, where corporate expertise met practical innovation. Sarah had taken to joining these sessions, her unique perspective as both test subject and project coordinator proving invaluable. "What if we adjusted the ankle rotation like this?" she suggested during one meeting, demonstrating a subtle movement with her own prosthetic. "It would make dancing easier." The engineers exchanged glances. "Dancing wasn't in the original specifications," one began. "Maybe it should have been," Mike interrupted, watching Sarah's expression. "We're not just building medical devices, we're building opportunities for full lives." That became their new design philosophy. Every innovation had to pass not just the technical requirements, but what they came to call the Sarah test. Would it help users do more than walk? Would it open new possibilities? The results began arriving in letters, photos, and videos from early recipients. A 10-year-old girl performing in her first ballet recital. A teenager scoring his first soccer goal. A young woman walking down the aisle at her wedding. Marie created a wall in the main lobby to showcase these moments, calling it the Gallery of First Steps. Employees started taking their breaks there, drawing inspiration from the growing collection of dreams fulfilled. One morning, as Mike made his routine rounds, he found Dr. Chen examining a new prototype with unusual intensity. "Something wrong?" he asked. "Not wrong," Dr. Chen replied, "but I think we've stumbled onto something extraordinary." He pointed to a modification they'd made to improve balance. "This adjustment doesn't just help with stability, it actually reduces phantom limb pain. We're seeing a 60% decrease in reported discomfort." The discovery launched a new research direction. Mike brought in neurologists and pain management specialists, expanding their understanding of how mechanical innovation could address biological challenges. "It's like you've always said," Dr. Peterson commented during one research review. "Sometimes you have to look at old problems from new angles." The facility's reputation grew. Medical schools requested internship programs, research institutions proposed collaborations, but Mike's proudest moment came when a group of veteran prosthetics users asked to form an advisory board. "We want to help guide the development," their spokesperson explained, "because for the first time we feel like someone is really listening to what we need." Sarah organized regular feedback sessions, bringing users together with engineers to share experiences and ideas. The sessions often ran late into the evening, with Mike taking notes as eagerly as any of his technical staff. One such evening, as the facility grew quiet, Mike found himself back in his workshop. The space had evolved, now housing both his old tools and the latest technical equipment, a bridge between past and present. Marie found him there, tinkering with a new joint design. "Successful day," she said, perching on her usual spot at his workbench. "The production numbers came in. We're ahead of schedule." "Numbers are good," Mike agreed, "but this is better." He showed her a letter he'd received that morning. It was from a small-town mechanic in Oregon who'd been inspired by Mike's story to start tinkering with assistive devices himself. "It's spreading," Marie realized. The idea that anyone with the right heart and mind can make a difference. Speaking of making a difference, Sarah's voice came from the doorway. She entered with James Wellington, both looking pleased about something. "Dad has some news." Wellington held up a tablet displaying global health statistics. "The WHO has taken notice. They want to discuss implementing our design in developing countries. Your cost-effective approach could make modern prosthetics accessible to millions who currently can't afford them." Mike thought about that first prototype, built from spare parts and hope. From one girl's need to run, had grown something that could help people around the world take their own first steps. "You know what this means," Sarah grinned. "We're going to need a bigger garage." On a quiet Sunday morning, Mike stood in his old garage, now more museum than workshop. Katie's photo still hung on the wall, but it had company now, a family portrait taken at last month's company picnic. In it, he stood with Marie, Sarah, and James Wellington, all of them laughing at something just before the camera clicked. "I thought I'd find you here," Marie said, entering with 2 cups of coffee, just as she had that night months ago when everything changed. "Getting nostalgic?" "Just thinking," Mike replied, accepting the coffee. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Marie smiled, slipping her hand into his. The simple gold band on her finger caught the morning light. He'd proposed 3 weeks ago, right here in the garage where they'd first grown close. I imagine Sarah did. That girl sees possibilities the rest of us miss. As if summoned by her name, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her prosthetics moving with fluid grace. At 15 now, she carried herself with a confidence that made Mike's heart swell with pride. "Mom said you'd be here," she said, joining them. She'd started calling Marie Mom gradually, naturally, the word flowing as smoothly as her steps. "Dad's waiting at the house. He says he has a surprise for us." The house was another change, a beautiful old Victorian on the edge of town that they'd restored together. Marie had overseen the renovation while Mike handled the mechanical systems, making it as much a fusion of their talents as everything else they did. They found James Wellington on the back porch, surrounded by papers, and wearing the relaxed smile that only appeared when he was away from corporate responsibilities. "There you are," he said, standing to greet them. "I've been thinking about family traditions." He handed Mike a document. It was a legal agreement, transferring 20% of Wellington Medical Technologies' ownership to Sarah when she turned 21. "Dad?" Sarah's voice held surprise and question. "You've earned it," Wellington said simply. "Not just through your work with the company, but through your vision. You saw the potential in a small-town garage before any of us." Mike watched Sarah study the document, seeing in her expression the same focused intelligence she brought to their technical discussions. She'd grown into her role at the company naturally, combining her father's business acumen with Mike's innovative spirit. "There's something else," Wellington continued, producing another envelope. "The Katie Harrison Foundation is expanding. We're opening a research center focused on pediatric mobility solutions. Sarah, we'd like you to head the project." The moment hung in the air, weighted with meaning. Mike felt Marie's hand tighten in his, both of them watching Sarah process the news. "I'd be working with kids," she said slowly, "helping them the way Mike helped me." "Who better?" Wellington smiled. "You understand both the technical and personal sides. You've lived it." Sarah turned to Mike, her eyes seeking something. "What?" "Do you think?" Mike looked at this girl who had changed his life, who had helped him transform grief into purpose. "I think Katie would be proud to have you carrying on her legacy." The words brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She moved to hug him. and Mike marveled again at the natural grace of her movement, remembering the wheelchair under the oak tree that seemed so long ago now. Later that evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of possibility, the four of them sat on the porch talking about the future. Marie and Sarah discussed plans for the research center, their shared medical background sparking ideas. Wellington added occasional business insights, but mostly listened with paternal pride. Mike sat back, taking in the scene. His family had grown in ways he never expected. A brilliant stepdaughter-to-be who shared his passion for helping others. A future wife who balanced his practical nature with her nurturing spirit, and a business partner who had become the brother he never had. The porch wind chimes, carefully transferred from his old garage, tinkled softly in the evening breeze. They were Katie's last art project, and their gentle music had always soothed his heart. Now they seemed to play a melody of healing, of family found and purpose discovered. "You're quiet," Marie observed, touching his arm gently. "Just grateful," Mike replied. "For all of it." Sarah looked up from her animated discussion with her father. "Even the corporate meetings." They all laughed, the sound carrying across the yard where, in the gathering dusk, fireflies began their evening dance. From somewhere in town, they could hear children playing, their voices free and joyful. "Even those," Mike smiled, "every step of the journey brought us here." The cease and desist letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, its legal letterhead stark against Mike's desk. Global Tech Medical, one of the largest medical device manufacturers in the world, was claiming patent infringement on key components of their prosthetic design. They're saying the hydraulic joint system is based on their existing patents, Wellington explained during the emergency board meeting. His usual calm demeanor showed cracks of concern. "They're demanding we halt production immediately." Mike stared at the technical drawings attached to the letter, his mind racing. "These designs aren't even similar to ours. They're trying to stretch their patent coverage to include basic mechanical principles. Unfortunately, their lead patent." Attorney interjected, "They have deep pockets and an aggressive legal team. They could tie us up in court for years." The implications hit hard. Years of litigation meant years of delayed production, delayed help for the children waiting for their chance to walk. The Katie Harrison Foundation had dozens of approved applications in process, families counting on them. "How many units do we have ready?" Mike asked, his voice tight. Dr. Peterson consulted his tablet. 300 completed, another 500 in various stages of production. "But if we have to stop—" "We can't stop," Sarah interrupted from her place at the conference table. She'd insisted on attending, her face set with determination. "Do you know how many kids are waiting? How many families have put their hopes in us?" The room fell silent, the weight of those hopes pressing down on everyone present. Mike thought of his own journey, of Sarah watching from under that oak tree, of every child who deserved the chance to run. "James," he said quietly, "what's our legal standing, really?" Wellington exchanged glances with their legal team. "Our patents are solid, but litigation is expensive. Global Tech knows this. They're counting on us not having the resources for a prolonged court battle." "They didn't do their homework then," Marie spoke up from her end of the table. "They don't understand what we're fighting for," as if to emphasize her point. A commotion arose in the lobby. Through the glass walls of the conference room, they could see families gathering, recipients of their prosthetics, parents of children on the waiting list, local supporters. Dr. Chen entered the room, slightly out of breath. "Word's gotten out about the lawsuit. They're here to show support." Mike walked to the window. The crowd had grown, filling the lobby with determined faces. He recognized many of them. the ballet dancer from their first production run, the soccer player who'd scored his first goal, parents who'd written thankful letters. Global tech sees us as a threat to their market share, he said, turning back to the room, but they're missing the point. We're not just making products, we're making futures possible. Sarah rolled her chair to join him at the window. Remember what you told me when you were building my first legs, about making our own someday? Mike nodded, the memory clear and sharp. Well, she continued, maybe it's time to make our own justice too. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Marie coordinated with medical professionals who'd worked with their prosthetics, gathering testimonials about their unique benefits. Dr. Peterson and his team compiled detailed technical documentation showing the originality of their designs. Local news stations picked up the story, broadcasting interviews with families whose lives had been changed by Harrison Wellington prosthetics. Social media exploded with support, sharing stories and photos of children running, playing, dancing. "Look at this," Sarah called out, showing Mike her tablet. A video was going viral. Children from across the country, all wearing their prosthetics, standing up one by one, declaring, "I stand with Harrison Wellington." The corporate board of Global Tech hadn't anticipated this response. Their legal threat, meant to quietly squash a competitor, had instead sparked a movement, but the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen burst into Mike's office late that evening, waving a medical journal. "The reduction in the phantom limb pain we discovered," he said excitedly. "It's unique to our design. The way our hydraulic system interfaces with nerve endings, it's completely novel. Global Tech's patents don't cover anything like it." Mike studied the medical data, his mechanic's mind translating the technical language into practical implications. "This isn't just about mobility anymore." "No," Dr. Chen agreed. "We've accidentally created a new therapeutic approach to chronic pain management. The medical applications go far beyond prosthetics." The discovery energized their legal team. This wasn't just about defending their existing patents. They had grounds for new ones that could revolutionize multiple fields of medicine. As midnight approached, Mike stood in his workshop, surrounded by the evidence of their innovation. On his bench lay the original prototype next to their latest model, a visual testament to how far they'd come. "We're not backing down," he told the waiting room of executives and lawyers. "Whatever it costs, however long it takes, we fight." Sarah, who had refused to go home despite the late hour, smiled. "They thought they were just taking on a company," she said. "They don't realize they're taking on a family." The Millbrook Town Hall had never been so crowded. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. Mike saw familiar faces everywhere, employees, patients, neighbors, friends, all gathered for what the mayor had dubbed an emergency community meeting. "For 3 generations, the Harrison family has been part of the backbone of this town," Mayor Thompson began, his voice carrying over the packed room. "When the factory closed, we thought our best days were behind us. But Mike Harrison and his team didn't just bring jobs back, they brought hope back." A spontaneous round of applause erupted. From her seat beside Mike, Marie squeezed his hand. Sarah, sitting on his other side, beamed with pride. "Now," the mayor continued, "some big city corporation thinks they can shut us down with their fancy lawyers. Well, they don't know Millbrook very well, do they?" The town clerk stood up, holding a thick stack of papers. "We've received letters of support from every medical facility that's worked with Harrison Wellington prosthetics. Dr. Chen has compiled their testimonials, documenting cases that demonstrate the unique benefits of our design." Dr. Chen took the podium next, his usual reserved manner giving way to passionate advocacy. The pain management breakthrough we've discovered isn't just an advantage, it's a revolution in prosthetic design. We've already submitted 5 new patent applications based on this technology. The technical presentation shifted to personal testimony. One by one, people stood to share their stories. A local physical therapist described the unprecedented recovery rates among her patients. A teacher talked about watching her student run for the first time. Parents spoke of transformed lives and renewed hope. Then Sarah stood up. The room fell silent as she made her way to the podium, her prosthetics moving with the natural grace that had amazed them all from the beginning. "I was that first patient," she began. "When I met Mike, I was just a girl in a wheelchair watching other kids play. He didn't see me as a medical challenge or a business opportunity. He saw me as a child who wanted to run." She paused, looking around the room. What Global Tech doesn't understand is that they're not fighting a company. They're fighting every child who wants to play soccer, every teenager who dreams of dancing at prom, every person who deserves the chance to walk tall. The next speaker was unexpected. James Wellington stood, his corporate polish softened by evident emotion. "When I first came to Millbrook, I thought I was just making a business investment. Instead, I found a community that taught me what really matters in creating change." As the meeting continued, practical support emerged. The local Chamber of Commerce pledged funds for legal expenses. Medical professionals volunteered expert testimony. Former employees of the old factory offered to share documentation of manufacturing processes that predated Global Tech's patents. But the most powerful moment came when old Joe Thompson, who'd been Mike's first customer decades ago, slowly made his way to the front. In his weathered hands, he held a stack of yellowed papers. "These here are Mike's daddy's old notebooks," he said, his voice rough with age and emotion. "Thomas Harrison was always sketching ideas for helping folks. There's drawings in here from 30 years ago that show the same kind of thinking that went into these prosthetics. This ain't about copying nobody. It's about carrying on a legacy of caring." Mike stared at the notebooks, remembering hours spent watching his father work, learning not just about mechanics, but about the heart behind the work. In those pages lay the seeds of everything they'd built. The meeting ended with a plan of action. The town would stand united. Production would continue. The legal team, bolstered by community support and new evidence, would fight back aggressively. As people began to file out, Marie turned to Mike. "You know what this reminds me of?" "What's that?" "That first night in the garage when you decided to help Sarah. You didn't know if it would work, but you knew it was right." Sarah, overhearing, added, "And look what happened because of that decision. How many lives have changed?" Mike looked around the emptying hall, at the faces of people who had become more than neighbors or employees. They had become family, united in purpose. "Global Tech thinks this is about patents and market share," he said quietly, "but they're fighting something they can't beat." "What's that?" Wellington asked, joining them. Mike smiled, thinking of his father's notebooks, of Katie's dream of helping others, of Sarah's first steps, of all the children yet to run hard, he said simply. "You can't patent that." The news broke on a Monday morning. Global Tech was withdrawing their lawsuit and proposing a settlement. Mike sat in his office reading the terms with Wellington and their legal team, hardly daring to believe it. "They're not just dropping the patent challenge," their lead attorney explained, barely containing her excitement. "They want to license our pain management technology. The settlement includes a substantial payment for past claims and ongoing royalties." Wellington looked up. From the documents, his expression thoughtful. This is more than a victory, it's a vindication. But Mike, look at page 12. Mike turned to the indicated section and felt his breath catch. Global Tech was offering to establish a joint research initiative, combining their resources with Harrison Wellington's innovation. The focus, making advanced prosthetics accessible to developing nations. They finally understood what we've been trying to do all along, Sarah said from the doorway, where she'd been listening. She moved into the room, the subtle whir of her prosthetics, a reminder of where everything had started. This was never about competition. It was about changing lives. The settlement transformed their future. Within hours, their stock price soared, and congratulatory messages poured in from around the world. But it was the small celebration in Mike's old garage that meant the most. Dad would have loved this, Mike told Marie, as they gathered with their closest supporters. The space was cramped with people, but no one minded. Dr. Chen was explaining the technical implications to a fascinated group of engineers. Sarah was showing some visiting children how her prosthetics worked, their eyes wide with wonder. He'd be proud, Marie agreed, but not surprised. You built exactly what he always taught you to build, something that helps people. Wellington raised his glass, calling for attention. I'd like to propose a toast to Mike Harrison, who taught a corporate executive that the best innovations come from the heart. To our incredible team, who never lost sight of our mission. And to Sarah, who showed us all what's possible when someone believes in you. The celebration was interrupted by Dr. Peterson rushing in, tablet in hand. You need to see this, he said, pulling up a video call. On the screen was a medical team in a rural clinic in Africa, surrounded by children waiting for prosthetic fittings. We just received word about the settlement, the lead doctor said. When can we expect the first shipment of the new low-cost units? Mike looked at Wellington, who nodded. The first production run starts tomorrow, Mike answered. We've been keeping the line ready. Sarah stepped forward, her business acumen showing through her youth. And with Global Tech's distribution network, we can reach clinics like yours worldwide within months instead of years. The implications of their victory continued to unfold. The Katie Harrison Foundation expanded its reach globally, with Sarah taking a leading role in coordinating international efforts. Dr. Chen's pain management breakthrough sparked new research directions, attracting medical pioneers from around the world to their facility. But it was the small moments that meant the most to Mike. Walking through the production floor, he watched as workers assembled prosthetics with pride, knowing each unit would change a life. The gallery of first steps had grown so large, it now filled an entire corridor, with new photos and letters arriving daily. One afternoon, as Mike worked in his garage-turned-innovation lab, he heard familiar footsteps approaching. Sarah entered, followed by a young girl in a wheelchair, the daughter of one of their new international partners. "Mike," Sarah said, her eyes twinkling with memory, "Lily here wants to run. I told her I know just the person to help make that happen." Mike looked at the girl, seeing the same determination he'd seen in Sarah years ago. "Well, Lily," he said, crouching down to her level, "let's talk about making someday happen today." Later, watching Sarah show Lily the prototype designs, Mike felt the full circle of their journey. The garage where everything began had become more than a workspace. It was an incubator of dreams, a place where hope took physical form. Wellington found him there, lost in thought. "You know," his friend and partner said, "when I first offered to fund your work, I thought I was just making a smart business decision. I never imagined we'd end up changing the whole industry's approach to..." Accessibility, neither did I, Mike admitted. I just wanted to help one girl run. And now? Mike gestured to where Sarah was explaining joint mechanics to an enthralled Lily, her own prosthetics moving with unconscious grace. Now we're helping the world run, but we're doing it the same way we started, one step at a time. Through the open garage door, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of promise. Somewhere in the distance, children were playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to innovate, new lives to change. But for now, in this moment, Mike Harrison stood in his garage and knew with absolute certainty that some victories transcend business and patents. Some victories were measured in first steps, in children's laughter, in dreams taking flight. The old oak tree still stood across from Harrison's auto repair, its branches now adorned with fairy lights that sparkled in the evening darkness. The original garage had been preserved as a working museum, while the sprawling Harrison Wellington Innovation Campus surrounded it like a protective embrace. Mike stood in the doorway, watching as Sarah led a group of engineering students through her favorite exhibit, the original workbench, where he'd built her first prosthetics. At 21 now, she'd grown into a poised young woman, her technical brilliance matched by her deep understanding of their mission. And this, she was saying, holding up the first prototype, is where it all began. Not with a big corporation or a fancy laboratory, but with one person who believed that caring enough to try was the first step toward innovation. The students, bright young minds from the newly established Harrison Wellington Technical Institute, listened intently. They were the first class in a program designed to blend engineering excellence with humanitarian vision. "Sarah's really coming into her own," Marie said softly, joining Mike in the doorway. She'd just returned from overseeing the opening of their newest pediatric mobility center in Southeast Asia. "Sometimes I see you in her expressions when she's solving a problem. I see Katie in her too," Mike replied. "That same determination to help others." He glanced at the worn photograph on the wall, forever preserved in its place of honor. I think they would have been friends. The sound of running feet drew their attention. Through the main campus courtyard, a group of children raced past, their prosthetics moving with natural grace. They were part of the summer program that brought kids from around the world to test new designs and help inspire future innovations. "Mr. Harrison," one of them called out, skidding to a stop, "look what I can do!" The boy executed a perfect cartwheel, his prosthetic legs moving with gymnastic precision. "Outstanding, Tommy," Mike grinned, remembering when such movements would have seemed impossible. "Have you shown Dr. Chen? He'll want to note that range of motion." Inside the garage museum, Sarah was now demonstrating the evolution of their hydraulic joint system. Each improvement came from listening to users. She explained, "We learned that mobility isn't just about walking. It's about dancing, playing sports, living life without limitations." The expansion of their work had transformed Millbrook. The old factory district now housed research facilities, training centers, and production lines that shipped hope around the world. But they'd maintained the town's heart, its sense of community and purpose. Dr. Peterson, now heading their global research division, appeared with excitement in his eyes. "Mike, you need to see this. The teams in Africa have combined our base design with local materials. They're creating sustainable production methods we never imagined." The innovation was spreading, taking root in different soils and blooming in unexpected ways. Local mechanics and engineers around the world were learning to adapt and maintain the prosthetics, creating jobs and building expertise in their communities. James Wellington, his hair now more silver than grey, joined them as they reviewed the international reports. "Remember when we thought success meant market share?" he mused. "Now we measure it in lives changed, in communities empowered." The Katie Harrison Foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams, not just providing prosthetics, but establishing support networks, training programs, and research initiatives. Sarah's leadership had brought fresh energy and insight, expanding their vision of what was possible. "Dad," Sarah called out, finishing with her student group. "Tell them about the night you decided to help me, about making our own someday." Mike smiled, stepping into the garage that had started it all. The tools on the walls, the worn workbench, the old coffee maker in the corner, everything preserved as a reminder that great changes often start in humble places. "I was standing right here," he began, touching the workbench, looking at a problem that seemed too big to solve. But sometimes the biggest problems just need someone to take that first step, to say, "Why not try?" The students leaned forward, caught by the simple power of the story. Mike saw in their faces the same spark of possibility he'd seen in Sarah's eyes all those years ago. "The real lesson," he continued, "isn't about building prosthetics. It's about building hope, about seeing beyond what is to what could be." Outside, the sun was setting over Millbrook, painting the sky in familiar shades of promise. The evening shift was starting at the production facility, crafting new possibilities one piece at a time. Children's laughter echoed from the testing. The playground, mixing with the gentle whir of prosthetics and the eternal music of dreams taking flight. On the morning of the Harrison Wellington Innovation Campus's 10th anniversary, Mike arrived early at his old garage. The golden morning light filtered through the windows, catching the dust motes in familiar patterns. His father's toolbox still sat in its place of honor, now accompanied by a simple plaque that read, "Every journey begins with a single step." The campus would soon be buzzing with activity. Delegates from around the world were arriving for the celebration. But Mike needed this quiet moment first. He ran his hand along the worn workbench where it had all started, remembering late nights and breakthrough moments. "I thought I'd find you here." Sarah's voice came from the doorway. She entered with Marie and James Wellington, all of them understanding his need for this private time. "Just visiting with old friends." Mike smiled, gesturing to Katie's photo, and his father's tools, remembering where it all began. Sarah touched the first prosthetic prototype, now carefully preserved in a display case. "I still remember that first day I stood up, the look on your face when it worked, like you just discovered something magical." "We did," Marie said softly. "We discovered that one person's kindness can change the world." The numbers told part of the story. Over 1 million children helped, 30 global production facilities, research centers on every continent. The Katie Harrison Foundation had become the world's largest provider of accessible prosthetic care, but the real story lived in smaller moments. "The WHO report came in this morning," Wellington shared, his voice proud. "Our new distributed manufacturing model has cut waiting times for prosthetics in developing nations by 80%. Local technicians are being trained everywhere. The knowledge is spreading." Through the window, they could see the morning shift arriving at the main facility. Among them were faces from around the world, engineers, researchers, craftspeople, all drawn by the vision that had started in this humble garage. "Did you see this morning's surprise?" Sarah asked, pulling out her tablet. She showed them a video from a small village in rural India, where a local mechanic had adapted their base design using regional materials. His innovation had further reduced costs while maintaining quality. That's exactly what we hoped would happen, Mike nodded. The technology becoming part of each community, evolving to meet local needs. The sound of young voices drew their attention. Through the garage door, they watched as a group of children arrived for their morning session at the mobility center. Some walked on prosthetics, others used wheelchairs, but all moved with confidence and joy. "Remember what you told me about making our own someday?" Sarah asked, watching the children. "Look at all the somedays we've made possible." Marie slipped her hand into Mike's. "Katie would be so proud of what her legacy has become." Mike thought of his daughter, of her dream to help other sick children, in a way she never could have imagined. That dream had come true. Through the foundation bearing her name, through the lives changed and hopes restored, Katie's spirit lived on. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Wellington mused, watching the campus come to life. "Not the patents or the profits, but the way this place has proved that doing good and doing well can be the same thing." Sarah nodded. "We're not just building prosthetics anymore. We're building futures, training new innovators, spreading hope." Through the open door came Dr. Chen, his hair now grey, but his enthusiasm undimmed. "The new neural interface trials are showing remarkable results," he reported excitedly. "We're getting closer to true sensory feedback." Mike smiled at his old friends, perpetual amazement at what was possible. That same spirit of discovery that had driven their first breakthrough still powered their research, still pushed the boundaries of what they could achieve. As the morning sun climbed higher, the garage filled with familiar faces: Dr. Peterson, old Joe Thompson, Ralph Kendrick, Clara from the library. Each had played a part in the story. Each had contributed to the legacy they'd built together. "It's time for the ceremony," Wellington reminded them gently. But Mike lingered a moment longer, looking at Katie's photo. "You know," he said quietly, "sometimes the best way to heal a broken heart is to help someone else stand tall." Sarah hugged him, understanding as always. "And sometimes the best way to build a legacy is to believe in the possibilities others can't see yet." Together they stepped out of the garage into the bright morning light. Across the campus, children ran and played. Researchers collaborated on new innovations, and dreams took shape in workshops and laboratories. The old oak tree stood proud and strong, its branches stretching toward the future. Mike Harrison looked at his family, the daughter of his heart, the woman who shared his vision, the partner who had believed in possibilities, and knew that some legacies couldn't be measured in patents or profits. They could only be measured in steps taken, in lives changed, in hopes restored. And somewhere, in the gentle breeze that stirred the oak's leaves, he could almost hear Katie's laughter. "Eternal as hope itself,"